Elena Hayes never imagined signing a contract would feel like signing her death warrant. But when she agrees to marry Dominic Russo, the most feared crime boss in the city, she walks into a gilded cage with no exit. What starts as a desperate deal to save her family becomes something far more dangerous, a slow-burning connection with a man who holds absolute power and absolute secrets. But when love and violence collide, Elena will face an impossible choice: stay and risk everything, or run and lose the one person who makes her feel truly alive. This is their story. If you're hooked already, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The rain came down in sheets that night, blurring the neon lights of the city into smears of color against the black sky. Elena Hayes stood under the awning of a closed cafe, her coat soaked through, her hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She checked her phone again. The message was still there, clinical and brief. Midnight. The address below. Come alone. Her father's medical bills had piled up faster than she could count. Her mother's part-time job barely covered groceries. Her younger brother was 2 semesters away from dropping out of college because they couldn't afford tuition. And Elena worked double shifts at a diner where the tips were thin and the customers handsy, and it still wasn't enough. Then the letter had arrived. Not a loan offer, not charity. An offer. Typed on expensive stationery, unsigned, but unmistakable in its implications. Miss Hayes, your family's debts will be cleared in full. Your brother's education will be funded through graduation. Your father will receive the best medical care available. In exchange, you will enter into a marriage contract with Dominic Russo for a period of no less than 2 years. All terms are non-negotiable. Your answer is required within 48 hours. She'd heard the name before. Everyone had. Dominic Russo didn't make headlines. He owned them. He controlled half the city's real estate, had politicians in his pocket, and ran an empire that existed in the shadows where the law didn't reach. People whispered about him in the same breath they used for ghost stories. And now he wanted to marry her. Elena had spent the last 2 days trying to find another way. She'd called every loan officer, every assistance program, every distant relative who might help. The answer was always the same: no. The numbers didn't work. The options didn't exist. So here she was, standing in the rain at 11:45, about to sell herself to a man she'd never met. The black car pulled up at exactly midnight. It was sleek, expensive, and entirely out of place on this shabby street. The back door opened, but no one stepped out. An invitation. Elena's stomach twisted. She thought about turning around, walking away, pretending this night had never happened. But then she thought about her father's pale face in the hospital bed, her mother's exhausted eyes, her brother's quiet disappointment when he'd said he was dropping out. She stepped off the curb and got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. A man sat across from her. Not Dominic, she assumed, but someone who worked for him. He was older, gray at the temples, with a face that gave nothing away. "Miss Hayes," he said. Not a question. "Yes. We'll take you to Mr. Russo now. You'll have 15 minutes to speak with him. If you agree to the terms, the paperwork will be finalized tonight. If you decline, you'll be returned here, and the offer will be withdrawn permanently." Elena's mouth was dry. What if I want time to think about it? You've had 48 hours. The car pulled away from the curb, smooth and silent. Elena watched the familiar streets slip past, replaced gradually by wider avenues, taller buildings, the kind of neighborhood where doormen wore uniforms and every window glowed with warm, unreachable light. They stopped in front of a building that stretched up into the clouds, all glass and steel and sharp edges. The man gestured for her to follow. Inside, the lobby was marble and quiet wealth. No one questioned them as they crossed to a private elevator. The man pressed a button marked PH, and the doors slid shut. Elena's heart was hammering. She caught her reflection in the polished steel, wet hair, pale face, cheap coat. She looked exactly like what she was, a girl in over her head. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse. It was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, rain streaking down the glass like tears. The furniture was minimal, modern, expensive. Everything was clean lines and muted colors, a space designed to intimidate. And standing by the windows, hands in his pockets, was Dominic Russo. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, tall, with dark hair and a face that would have been handsome if it weren't so cold. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, tailored perfectly to a frame that suggested he was no stranger to violence despite the expensive veneer. He didn't turn around immediately, just stood there, looking out at the city like he owned it, which, Elena supposed, he did. "Miss Hayes," he said finally. His voice was low, controlled, with an edge that made her instinctively step back. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't have much choice," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "You always have a choice." He turned then, and his eyes, dark, unreadable, settled on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You could have ignored the letter. You could have walked away tonight. You're here because you chose to be." "My family. I know." He crossed the room, moving with the kind of grace that came from absolute confidence. "Your father's heart condition, your mother's exhaustion, your brother's abandoned dreams. I know everything about you, Elena. The question is whether you're willing to do what's necessary to save them." She lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. "Why me?" For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or respect. "Because you're unremarkable. No scandal, no connections, no ambitions beyond survival. You won't draw attention, you won't ask questions, and most importantly, you'll do what you're told." The words stung, but they were true. That was exactly why she was here. "What do you get out of this?" she asked. "That's not your concern. If I'm signing my life away, I think I deserve to know." Dominic studied her for a long moment. "There are people who believe I can be controlled through personal leverage. A wife provides certain protections, certain appearances. You'll fulfill that role, and in exchange, your family will want for nothing. For 2 years, minimum." Elena's hands clenched at her sides. "And what does this marriage entail exactly?" "You'll live here. You'll accompany me to events as needed. You'll behave as a wife should in public." He paused. "What happens in private is negotiable." Her cheeks burned. I'm not interested in unwilling partners, Miss Hayes." His tone was flat, almost bored. "If the arrangement becomes physical, it will be because we both choose it. Until then, you'll have your own room, your own space. I have no intention of forcing myself on you." The relief was immediate, though she tried not to show it. "And after 2 years?" "After 2 years, you're free to leave. Your family's debts remain cleared. Your brother's education remains funded. You walk away with a generous settlement and my guarantee that no harm will come to you or anyone you care about." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch?" Elena asked. Dominic's smile was thin. "The catch, Miss Hayes, is that you'll be married to me. That comes with certain complications. People who want to hurt me may try to use you. You'll need to be careful, vigilant, and above all, you'll need to be loyal." "Loyal?" "You don't betray me. You don't run to the authorities. You don't share what you see or hear in this house with anyone, ever." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Because if you do, the deal is void, and I promise you, the consequences will be severe." Elena's throat was tight. She'd known this wouldn't be simple, but hearing it laid out so starkly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "I need an answer," Dominic said. "Now." She thought about her father, hooked up to machines he couldn't afford. Her mother, working herself into an early grave. Her brother, giving up on the future he deserved. She thought about the alternative. More debt, more desperation, more nights lying awake wondering if this would be the month they lost everything. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "when would this start?" "Tonight. We'll sign the papers within the hour. The marriage will be legal and binding. Your family's debts will be cleared by morning." "Tonight," she repeated. "I don't believe in delays, Miss Hayes. You're either in or you're out." Elena closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to find another way, to refuse to let this cold, dangerous man buy her like a piece of property. But there was no other way. She'd looked, she'd tried. This was the only option left. "I'll do it," she whispered. When she opened her eyes, Dominic was watching her with that same unreadable expression. "You're certain?" "No." The honesty surprised them both. But I'll do it anyway. Something shifted in his gaze, respect, maybe, or recognition. Then we have an agreement. He gestured to the man who'd brought her here. Within minutes, papers were spread across the glass dining table. Elena read through them with shaking hands, trying to absorb the legal language that essentially bound her life to a stranger. It was all there. The financial obligations fulfilled, the timeline, the behavioral expectations, and at the bottom, a line for her signature. She picked up the pen. "Once you sign," Dominic said quietly, "there's no going back." Elena met his eyes. "I know." She signed her name. Man. The wedding happened 3 days later. It wasn't the ceremony she'd imagined as a little girl. No white dress, no flowers, no family in the pews. Just a judge in a private office, 2 witnesses she didn't know, and a man she was legally binding herself to for reasons that had nothing to do with love. Elena wore a simple navy dress she'd bought at a department store. Dominic wore another perfect suit. The vows were brief, transactional. When the judge pronounced them married, Dominic's kiss was perfunctory, a brush of lips that felt more like a business handshake than anything romantic. And just like that, she was Mrs. Russo. The penthouse became her prison, though it was the most luxurious prison imaginable. Dominic had been true to his word. She had her own bedroom, her own bathroom, her own space. The room was bigger than her family's entire apartment, with a bed so soft she barely slept the first few nights, too aware of how wrong everything felt. Her family's debts vanished overnight. Her father's medical bills paid, her mother's rent covered for the next 5 years, her brother's tuition, a full scholarship in his name, courtesy of an anonymous donor. Elena called home that first week, listening to her mother's tearful gratitude, her father's confused relief, her brother's excited chatter about returning to school. She told them she'd gotten a new job, that she was fine, that they didn't need to worry. She didn't tell them she'd sold herself to a monster. Because that's what Dominic was, wasn't he? A monster in an expensive suit. Except he didn't act like one. The first morning after the wedding, Elena woke to find breakfast waiting in the kitchen. Coffee, fresh fruit, pastries from a bakery she couldn't pronounce. Dominic was already gone, but there was a note in sharp, precise handwriting. "Help yourself. The kitchen is fully stocked. Make yourself comfortable." She spent the day exploring the penthouse, trying to understand the space she now lived in. The living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows. The library filled with books in multiple languages. The gym. The office, with a door that was always locked. She didn't see Dominic until evening. He came home at 7, looking tired. The kind of tired that came from more than just long hours. He loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, and only then seemed to notice her sitting in the living room with a book. "You don't have to wait up for me," he said. "I wasn't. I was reading." He glanced at the book, a mystery novel she'd grabbed from the library. "Is the room acceptable?" "It's fine. More than fine. Perfect, actually, in a sterile sort of way. If you need anything, tell Marcus," the gray-haired man who'd collected her that first night. "He manages the household." "Okay." An awkward silence stretched between them. This was her husband, Elena thought wildly. This stranger she'd known for less than a week. "I have work to do," Dominic said finally. "Don't wait dinner on me." He disappeared into his office, and Elena was alone again. It became a pattern. Dominic left early, came home late. When they crossed paths, the conversations were brief, polite, distant. He treated her like a house guest he was obligated to accommodate. Courteous, but uninvolved. And Elena didn't know what to do with herself. She'd always worked, always had something to fill her days, shifts at the diner, errands for her family, the constant hustle of trying to make ends meet. Now she had nothing but time and a gilded cage to spend it in. She tried to stay busy. She read. She explored the neighborhood during the day, always careful to return before Dominic came home. She learned the rhythms of the penthouse, the way Marcus came and went with military precision, the way the housekeeper arrived twice a week and never asked questions. She learned to be invisible. 2 weeks into the marriage, everything changed. Elena was in the kitchen making tea when Dominic came home, earlier than usual, and with blood on his knuckles. She froze, the kettle forgotten. He saw her staring. "It's not mine." That didn't make it better. He moved to the sink, running water over his hands with a calmness that suggested this was routine. The blood swirled down the drain, pink and then clear. "Are you hurt?" Elena asked, hating how her voice shook. "No." "Should I? Do you need—" "I'm fine." He dried his hands on a towel, methodical and controlled. When he looked at her, his expression was unreadable. "Go to bed, Elena." It wasn't a request. She fled to her room, heart pounding. The image of blood on his hands burned into her mind. This was what she'd signed up for. This was the reality of who Dominic Russo was. Not just a businessman, but a criminal. Someone who hurt people. Someone who came home with evidence of violence like it was nothing. She should have been terrified, should have wanted to run. But instead, lying in her too-soft bed, Elena found herself wondering whose blood it had been. What had happened? Whether Dominic was really fine, or if that control was just another mask. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Dominic was gone before she woke. But there was a note on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. "I'm sorry you saw that. It won't happen again." It didn't. But something had shifted between them. Dominic started coming home earlier. Not every night, but more often. He'd pour himself a drink, settle into the armchair by the windows, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, he'd ask about her day. The conversations were stilted at first. Elena didn't know how to talk to him, this man who was her husband in name only. But slowly, carefully, they found a rhythm. She learned that he took his coffee black, that he was fluent in 4 languages, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a knife fight when he was 19. She learned that he read voraciously, that he hated small talk, that beneath the cold exterior was a mind that never stopped calculating. And he learned about her degree in literature she'd never finished, about her love of old movies, about the way she'd always wanted to travel but never had the money. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't even warmth, really, but it was something. A month into the marriage, Dominic came home to find Elena cooking. She'd been bored, restless, and the kitchen was better stocked than any she'd ever had access to. So she'd made pasta, nothing fancy, just the recipe her grandmother used to make. Dominic stood in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I made too much," Elena said, defensive. "I thought maybe if you haven't eaten—" "I haven't. It's just pasta, nothing special." "It smells good?" They ate together at the kitchen island, the first meal they'd shared since the wedding. Elena expected awkwardness, but instead found herself relaxing into the silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was almost companionable. "You're a good cook," Dominic said finally. "My grandmother taught me. She said a woman should always be able to feed herself and the people she loves." Elena paused, realizing what she'd said. "Not that I mean, I know what you meant." But there was something in his tone, a softness she hadn't heard before. After that, cooking became her thing. She'd make dinner, and sometimes Dominic would be home to eat it. Sometimes he wouldn't. But when he was, they'd sit together in the kitchen, talking about nothing and everything, building something fragile between them. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. 2 months in, Elena made a mistake. She'd been careful to stay out of Dominic's business. She never asked what he did during the day, never questioned the phone calls he took in hushed tones, never pried into the locked office. But curiosity was a dangerous thing. It was late afternoon, and she'd been looking for a book in the library when she'd heard voices from Dominic's office. The door was cracked open, unusual since he always kept it locked. She should have walked away. Instead, she crept closer. "Payment was due last week," Dominic's voice cold and sharp. "I don't accept excuses." "Mr. Russo, please, I just need a little more time. You've had time. Now you're out of it. My family should have been your first priority. Instead, you gambled away money that wasn't yours. That was your choice. Now you face the consequences." There was a sound, a scuffle, a cry of pain. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "You have 48 hours to deliver what you owe," Dominic continued, still calm, still controlled. "If you don't, we'll take payment another way. Are we clear?" Yes, Mr. Russo. Get him out of here." Footsteps approached the door. Elena ran, heart pounding, barely making it to her room before the office door opened fully. She pressed her back against her bedroom door, breathing hard. This was who he was. who he really was, beneath the suits and the careful manners and the quiet evenings over pasta. A man who threatened people, who took payment in blood when money wasn't available. A man she was tied to for 2 years. That night, Dominic knocked on her door, the first time he'd ever done so. "Come in," Elena called, her voice steadier than she felt. He entered, still in his work clothes, his expression unreadable. "You heard?" Not a question, a statement. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," she said quickly. "The door was open and I know." He moved to the window, looking out at the city. "You're afraid of me now." Elena opened her mouth to deny it, but the word stuck in her throat. Because yes, she was afraid. Not of him hurting her. She didn't think he would, contract or not, but afraid of what he represented, the darkness he lived in. "I won't apologize for what I am," Dominic said quietly. "This is my world, Elena. It's brutal and unforgiving, and the people in it understand that. The man you heard today made his choices. Now he lives with them. He said he had a family. He should have thought of them before he stole from me." Dominic turned to face her, his dark eyes intense. "I'm not a good man. I never claimed to be. But I have rules. I have lines. And within those boundaries, I keep order in a world that would be chaos without it. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it necessary." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You can leave, you know. The contract be damned. If this is too much for you, if I'm too much, I'll release you from the agreement. Your family's debts will still be paid. You'll be free." Elena stared at him. "You'd let me go? I told you on the first night, you always have a choice." She should take it, should run while she had the chance, before this world pulled her in deeper. But then she thought about the last 2 months, the quiet evenings, the conversations that had become less guarded, the way Dominic looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious he didn't quite know how to hold. "No," she heard herself say. "I'm staying." Something flickered in his expression, relief maybe, though it was gone too quickly to be sure. "Why?" "Because..." Elena struggled for words. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be seen as more than their worst choices, even you." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with something neither of them could name. "Get some rest," Dominic said finally. "We have an event tomorrow night. You'll need to be ready." "An event?" "A charity gala. You'll be introduced as my wife. Officially." He met her eyes. "Can you do that?" Elena lifted her chin. "I signed a contract, didn't I? I'll do my part." "I know you will." He left, closing the door softly behind him. And Elena sat on her bed, wondering what exactly she'd just committed herself to, and why the thought of standing beside Dominic Russo tomorrow night felt less like an obligation and more like a choice she actually wanted to make. The gala dress arrived the next morning, a deep emerald gown that probably cost more than her family's rent for a year. It fit perfectly, which meant Dominic had somehow known her exact measurements. She tried not to think about how he'd acquired that information. When she emerged from her room that evening, Dominic was waiting in the living room. He was in a tuxedo that made him look even more dangerous than usual, all sharp lines and controlled power. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her. "You look beautiful." The compliment caught her off guard. "Thank you. I need to brief you before we arrive." He gestured to the sofa. "There will be people there who'll try to use you to get to me. Politicians looking for leverage. Rivals looking for weakness. You need to be careful what you say." "I'm not an idiot, Dominic." "I know, but these people are predators. They'll smile and make small talk while sizing you up for vulnerabilities." He paused. "Stay close to me. Don't accept drinks from anyone but the servers. And if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately." The protective edge in his tone surprised her. "Are you worried about me?" "You're my wife. Your safety is my responsibility." My wife. The words sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. The gala was everything she'd expected and nothing she was prepared for. The ballroom glittered with wealth and power. Politicians, business magnates, people whose names she recognized from headlines. And at the center of it all was Dominic, moving through the crowd with the ease of someone who owned the room. Elena stayed at his side, playing her part, She smiled, made polite conversation, let Dominic introduce her as his wife with a possessive hand at the small of her back. And she watched. She watched the way people approached Dominic with respect tinged with fear, the way conversation stopped when he entered a circle, the way even the most powerful people in the room deferred to him. This was his world. And for tonight, she was part of it. Mrs. Russo. A woman approached, older, elegant, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What a surprise to hear about your marriage. It all happened so quickly. When you know, Elena said smoothly, feeling Dominic's approval in the slight squeeze of his hand. How did you meet? Through mutual acquaintances. Vague enough to be believable. The woman's smile sharpened. You're not from our usual circles, are you? The dismissal was clear. Elena was an outsider, a nobody who'd somehow landed a prize she didn't deserve. Before she could respond, Dominic stepped in. My wife comes from a world with actual values, Margaret. I think you'd recognize that's refreshing. The woman's smile faltered. Of course, I meant no offense. I'm sure you didn't, but the ice in Dominic's tone said otherwise. They moved on, and Elena found herself fighting a smile. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You're my wife. No one disrespects you. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her heart skip. As the night wore on, Elena began to understand the game being played. This wasn't just a social event, it was theater. Every conversation was a negotiation, every smile a calculation. And Dominic was the master of it all, controlling the room with quiet authority. She was learning to read him now, the subtle tension in his jaw when someone tested his patience, the way his hand tightened on her waist when he sensed a threat, the calculated charm he deployed to keep people off balance, and beneath it all, the constant vigilance. He was always aware of her, of the room, of every potential danger. It was exhausting and exhilarating. You're doing well, Dominic murmured during a brief moment alone. I'm terrified. You hide it better than most. He studied her face. Ready to go home? Home. He'd called the penthouse home. Yes. The car ride back was quiet. Elena's feet ached from the heels, and the emotional weight of the evening was beginning to settle. Thank you, Dominic said as they pulled up to the building. For what? For tonight. I know it wasn't easy. Elena looked at him, really looked at him. In the dim light of the car, he seemed almost vulnerable, tired, human. You were right, she said softly. Those people are predators. Yes. But so are you. His smile was faint, sad. Yes. The difference is, you don't pretend to be anything else. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. For a moment, Elena thought he might say something more. Instead, he opened the car door. Come on, let's get you out of those shoes. That night, Elena lay in bed replaying the evening. The way Dominic had protected her, the pride in his voice when he'd called her his wife, the unexpected warmth of his hand on her waist. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to start seeing him as anything other than a means to an end. But somewhere between the quiet dinners and the careful conversations and the fierce protectiveness in his eyes tonight, something had changed. And Elena was terrified to realize that she was starting to care about Dominic Russo, not as an obligation, but as a person, as a man, as someone she might actually be falling for. The thought kept her awake until dawn. The weeks that followed the gala brought a shift so gradual, Elena almost didn't notice it happening. Almost. It started with small things. Dominic coming home earlier, not just occasionally but regularly, finding excuses to linger in the kitchen while she cooked, asking questions that went beyond polite small talk, what she was reading, what she thought about the news, whether she'd ever been to the opera. No, she'd answered that last one, chopping vegetables for dinner, never had the money for tickets. The next week there were 2 tickets on the kitchen counter, orchestra seats, the best in the house. I have a business obligation Friday night, Dominic had said, casual as if he hadn't just handed her something worth hundreds of dollars. I thought you might want to go instead of sitting here alone. Elena had stared at the tickets, then at him. You're giving me your tickets? I've seen La Boheme a dozen times. You haven't seen it once. He'd paused at the doorway of his office. Marcus will arrange a car and security. Security? You're my wife, Elena. That means protection. She'd gone to the opera with Marcus's silent presence 3 rows back, and she'd cried during the final act, overwhelmed by the music and the realization that Dominic had been paying attention, had listened, had cared enough to give her something she'd never thought she'd have. When she'd thanked him the next morning, he'd simply nodded and asked if she'd enjoyed it, as if transforming her dreams into reality was nothing remarkable. But it was remarkable. It was everything. The dinners became routine. Elena would cook and Dominic would appear, drawn by the smell of garlic and herbs and something like home. They'd sit together at the island, and the conversations would stretch longer each night. He told her about growing up in a world where loyalty meant survival and weakness meant death. About learning to read people before he could read books. About the uncle who'd raised him after his parents died, who taught him that power was the only currency that mattered. He was wrong, Dominic said one night, swirling wine in his glass. Power matters. But it's not the only thing. What else is there? Elena asked. He'd looked at her for a long moment. I'm still figuring that out. She told him about her own childhood, smaller, simpler, but no less complicated. About watching her parents struggle, about the weight of being the oldest, about the guilt of wanting more than survival when survival was all they could manage. That's why you agreed to this, Dominic said. Not a question. That's why I agreed to this, Elena confirmed. I couldn't watch them drown anymore. And now? Now they're safe. And I'm here. Do you regret it? Elena considered the question, really considered it. 2 months ago, the answer would have been immediate. Yes. Obviously, yes. But now? No, she said softly. I don't. Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Relief, warmth, something dangerously close to hope. Good. 3 months into the marriage, Elena woke at 2 a.m. to sounds from the living room. She found Dominic at the piano she hadn't even realized worked, playing something haunting and beautiful in the dark. She stood in the doorway, watching his fingers move across the keys, the music pouring out like a confession. When the last note faded, he spoke without turning around. I didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. I couldn't sleep. She moved closer. I didn't know you played. My mother taught me, before she died. His hands rested on the keys, still and silent. I don't play often anymore. Why tonight? Because some nights the quiet is too loud. Elena understood that. The weight of thoughts that wouldn't stop, the past that wouldn't stay buried. She sat beside him on the bench, close enough to feel the warmth of him. Play something else, she said. He did. Something softer this time, gentler. And Elena closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, feeling something shift between them in the darkness. Something fragile and new and terrifying in its intensity. When he finished, she opened her eyes to find him watching her. Elena, he said, and her name in his voice sounded like a prayer. Yes? But he just shook his head, standing abruptly. It's late. You should sleep. He left her sitting at the piano, her heart racing, wondering what he'd almost said. The touching started after that. Nothing inappropriate. Dominic was always careful, always controlled, but his hand would find the small of her back when they walked together. His fingers would brush hers when he handed her a coffee cup. He'd tuck a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that made her breath catch. And Elena found herself leaning into those touches, craving them, disappointed on the rare evenings when Dominic was distant or distracted. This wasn't part of the contract. This wasn't supposed to happen. But it was happening anyway. 4 months in, everything changed. They were having dinner, pasta again, because it had become their thing, when Dominic's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression went cold. I have to take this. He stepped into his office, and Elena heard the sharp edge in his voice through the door. I told you to handle it. No, that's not acceptable. Then make it acceptable. He emerged 10 minutes later, his face a mask of controlled fury. What's wrong? Elena asked. Nothing that concerns you. The dismissal stung. Dominic, I said it's handled. He grabbed his jacket. I have to go out. Don't wait up. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with a half-eaten dinner and a sick feeling in her stomach. He didn't come home that night, or the next morning. Elena tried not to worry, tried to tell herself this was normal, that Dominic had business to attend to, that his absence didn't mean anything. But by the second night, worry had turned to fear. She was pacing the living room when Marcus appeared. "Mrs. Russo, you should rest." "Where is he?" Elena demanded. "What's happening?" Marcus's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Russo is handling a situation. He'll return when it's resolved." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give you." Elena wanted to scream. Instead, she returned to her room and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining all the ways Dominic's world could swallow him whole. He came home at dawn on the third day. Elena heard the door open from her bedroom. She rushed out to find him in the living room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. There was a bruise darkening his jaw, and his knuckles were raw. "You're hurt," she said, moving toward him. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." She reached for his hand, examining the damage. "What happened?" "Business." "Don't give me that. 3 days, Dominic. 3 days of silence." He pulled his hand away, but gently. "There was a problem with one of my operations. People who thought they could take advantage of a perceived weakness. I had to remind them why that was a mistake." "By doing this to yourself?" "You should see the other guy." The attempt at humor fell flat. Elena's hands were shaking. "I thought something had happened to you. I thought—" Her voice broke. Dominic's expression softened. "Elena, don't do that again. Don't disappear without telling me where you are or if you're safe. I know I'm just—" She struggled for words. "I know this is just a contract, but I deserve at least that much." "Just a contract," Dominic repeated quietly. He moved closer, his dark eyes intense on hers. "Is that really what you think this is?" Elena's heart was hammering. What else would it be? He reached out, his bruised hand cupping her face with unexpected tenderness. "I don't know. But it stopped being just a contract the night I found you reading in my library. When you made me dinner without being asked. When you stood beside me at that gala like you actually wanted to be there." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "When you started looking at me like I might be worth saving." "Dominic," she whispered, "I scared you. When you heard me with that man in my office, I saw the fear in your eyes, but you stayed anyway. Why?" "Because I saw something else, too." Elena's gaze found his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive fabric. "I saw someone who has lines, who has rules, who could have forced me into anything but chose to give me space instead. I'm not a good man, Elena." "Maybe not, but you're not the monster you pretend to be either." The distance between them disappeared. Dominic's forehead rested against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I want to kiss you," he said roughly, "but if I start, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." "Then don't stop." His control shattered. The kiss was nothing like their wedding. This was heat and hunger and months of tension finally breaking free. Dominic's hands tangled in her hair, and Elena pressed closer, tasting coffee and exhaustion and something desperately like need. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic's eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. "This changes things," he said. "I know. We can't go back." "I don't want to." He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. When he pulled back, his thumb traced her swollen lips. "I should shower, sleep. I've been awake for 3 days. Then go." But Elena's hands were still fisted in his shirt. "Come with me." Her breath caught. "Dominic, not like that. Not yet." His smile was tired but genuine. I don't want to be alone right now." So Elena followed him to his bedroom, the first time she'd ever entered it. The space was surprisingly sparse, all dark wood and clean lines. Dominic disappeared into the bathroom, and she heard the shower start. She perched on the edge of the bed, nervous and exhilarated and terrified of what they'd just started. When he emerged, he was in sweatpants and nothing else, his hair damp, the bruise on his jaw standing out starkly against his skin. "You're staring," he said. "You're half naked in front of me for the first time. I'm allowed to stare." His laugh was surprised and genuine. "Fair enough." He slid into bed, then held out a hand. "Come here." Elena kicked off her shoes and climbed in beside him, letting him pull her against his chest. His arms wrapped around her, solid and warm, and she felt the tension drain out of him. "This is all I want right now," he murmured into her hair. "Just this." "Okay." "Elena?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for worrying about me. No one's done that in a very long time." She tilted her head up to look at him. "Get used to it." His smile was soft, almost vulnerable. "I intend to." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since the marriage began, Elena felt like she'd come home. The weeks that followed were a revelation. They didn't rush into anything physical beyond that first kiss. Dominic seemed determined to savor every step, to build something real instead of just giving in to attraction. But the touches multiplied. His hand in hers while they watched movies, her head on his shoulder while he worked at the dining table. Stolen kisses in the kitchen that left them both breathless. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. Dominic told her about the empire he'd built, the choices he'd made, the weight of power he carried. Elena shared her dreams, the ones she'd abandoned and the new ones beginning to form. "What do you want?" Dominic asked one night, both of them on the couch, Elena's feet in his lap. "If you could have anything." "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "A month ago, I would have said freedom. But now..." "Now? Now I think maybe I want this. Whatever this is we're building." His hand stilled on her ankle. "Even knowing what I am, what I do?" "You've never lied to me about that. And you've never brought that darkness home to me." She sat up, meeting his eyes. "You're not just one thing, Dominic. You're complicated. You're contradictions. And I'm starting to think that's what makes you real." He pulled her into his lap, his arms tight around her. "You're going to undo me completely, aren't you?" "Is that so bad?" "It's terrifying." "Good," Elena said, and kissed him until the fear in his eyes turned to heat. 5 months in, Elena realized she was in love with him. It hit her one ordinary morning, watching him read the paper at the kitchen island, his hair still messy from sleep, coffee cup in hand. The domesticity of it, the rightness. This dangerous man who could destroy lives with a phone call was sitting in their kitchen in sweatpants, frowning at the stock market report like it was a personal insult. And she loved him, completely, impossibly, irrevocably. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable, like this was always where they were heading from the moment she'd signed that contract. "You're staring again," Dominic said without looking up. "I'm thinking about you." Now he looked up, his dark eyes finding hers. "Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" "Complicated thoughts." He set down the paper, giving her his full attention. "Tell me." But Elena couldn't. Not yet. Because saying it out loud would make it real, and making it real meant risking everything. "Later," she said. "I promise." Dominic studied her face, then nodded. "I'll hold you to that." That night, they made love for the first time. It wasn't planned. They were on the couch, a movie forgotten in the background, kisses turning deeper, hands wandering. When Dominic pulled back to ask if she was sure, Elena answered by pulling him closer. "I'm sure," she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." He carried her to his bedroom, their bedroom, she thought dizzily, and took his time undressing her, worshipping every inch of skin like she was something precious. When he finally moved inside her, Elena felt the last walls between them crumble. This wasn't a transaction. This wasn't an obligation. This was love. Afterward, tangled in sheets with Dominic's arm around her waist, Elena finally found the courage. "I love you," she said into the darkness. His breath caught. For a moment, she thought maybe she'd miscalculated, moved too fast, revealed too much. Then he turned her to face him, his expression raw and open in a way she'd never seen. "Say it again." "I love you," Elena repeated, her hand on his chest, feeling his racing heart. "I don't deserve you," Dominic said roughly. "I don't deserve this. But I'm selfish enough to want it anyway, to want you, always." "That's not an answer." "The answer is yes. The answer is, I fell for you the night you told me I wasn't a monster. The answer is, I've been yours since you stayed when you could have run." He kissed her, deep and claiming. "I love you, Elena. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything." She was crying now, happy tears that he kissed away. This wasn't supposed to happen. The best things never are. They made love again, slower this time, a confirmation of everything they'd just confessed. And when Elena finally fell asleep in Dominic's arms, she felt complete in a way she never had before. 6 months into the marriage, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the positive test in disbelief, her hands shaking. They'd been careful, mostly, but apparently not careful enough. Pregnant. With twins, the doctor confirmed at her first appointment, surprise and joy warring in her chest. She didn't know how to tell Dominic. This wasn't part of the contract. They'd never discussed children. What if he didn't want this? What if it was too much, too soon, too real? But she couldn't hide it. Wouldn't hide it. That night, after dinner, she found him in his office. "We need to talk," she said. Dominic looked up from his laptop, immediately alert. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, at least I don't think it is. But something's happened and I need to tell you before I lose my nerve." He was around the desk in seconds, his hands on her shoulders. "Elena, you're scaring me. What is it?" "I'm pregnant," she blurted out, "with twins. I know we didn't plan this and I know it's complicated, but..." Dominic kissed her, cutting off the nervous babble. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "Twins," he repeated, almost dazed. "We're having twins. You're not upset?" "Upset?" He laughed, the sound full of wonder. "Elena, you're giving me a family. How could I possibly be upset?" Relief flooded through her. "I was so scared you wouldn't want this. I want everything with you. The life we're building, the future we're creating, all of it." His hand moved to her still flat stomach, reverent. "These babies are proof that something good can come from the darkest circumstances, that love can grow where it wasn't supposed to." Elena covered his hand with hers. "We're really doing this. We're really doing this." The next months were the happiest of Elena's life. Dominic became almost obsessively protective, monitoring her health, researching pregnancy like it was a business venture, preparing the spare bedroom as a nursery with meticulous care. He talked to her stomach every night, telling their unborn children about the world they'd be born into, the life he'd give them, the love that already surrounded them. "They're going to have everything we didn't," he promised one night, his head resting against her growing belly. "Safety, stability, parents who choose them every single day." "You're going to be an amazing father," Elena said, running her fingers through his hair. "I'm going to try. That's all I can promise." 7 months pregnant, Elena was glowing, happy, in love, building a future with the man she'd married out of desperation and fallen for despite every reason not to. She should have known it was too perfect to last. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Dominic had a meeting he couldn't postpone, something about a territorial dispute that needed his personal attention. Elena kissed him goodbye, telling him to be careful, not worried because he was always careful. She was reading in bed when she heard the shouting. At first, she thought she'd imagined it, but then it came again. Raised voices from somewhere below, carried through the ventilation system. Elena got out of bed, moving slowly with her pregnant belly, and crept to the hallway. The sounds were coming from Dominic's office on the lower level, the one he kept locked, the one she'd learned not to ask about. She knew she should go back to bed, knew this was none of her business. But something in those voices made her skin crawl. She took the stairs carefully, following the sound. The office door was slightly open, and through the crack she could see inside. Dominic was there, still in his suit, but there were 3 other men, 2 holding a third, who was on his knees, blood streaming from his nose. "Last chance," Dominic said, his voice ice cold. "Where's the shipment?" "I told you, I don't know," the bleeding man cried. "I swear." Dominic nodded to one of the others, and Elena watched in frozen horror as they grabbed the man's hand and broke 2 of his fingers with clinical efficiency. The scream was inhuman. "Wrong answer," Dominic said calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "Let's try again. Where is the shipment?" Elena's hand flew to her mouth, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't the man who kissed her stomach every night. This wasn't the man who'd cried when he felt the baby's kick for the first time. This was the monster she'd almost forgotten existed. She must have made a sound because suddenly Dominic's head snapped toward the door. Their eyes met. For one terrible moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena ran. She made it back to the bedroom, her heart pounding, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the lock. She could hear footsteps on the stairs, Dominic calling her name. Elena, open the door. Go away. Please, let me explain. Explain what? That you torture people? That you break bones like it's nothing? Her voice was shrill, panicked. I saw you, Dominic. I saw what you really are. I know. His voice was strained. I know what you saw. But that man, he stole from me. Put my entire operation at risk. People could die because of what he did. So you break his fingers? I do what's necessary to protect what's mine, including you, including our children. Elena pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling the babies move. I can't raise our children in this world. I won't. Elena, please. I need you to leave, right now. I need to think. Silence. Then quietly. Okay, I'll sleep in the guest room, but we're talking about this in the morning. She heard him walk away, and only then did she sink to the floor, sobbing. Everything she'd built with Dominic, the love, the trust, the future, all of it felt like a lie now, because she'd let herself forget who he really was, what he did in the shadows while she played house in his penthouse. But now she'd seen it, and she couldn't unsee it. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the city lights, trying to figure out what to do. By morning, she'd made her decision. She packed a single bag while the sun was still rising, moving quietly through the bedroom that had become theirs, touching things that felt like memories already slipping away. The photo of them from the gala, her favorite books from his library, the ultrasound images tucked into her wallet. Everything else she could leave behind. Everything except her children. Dominic was waiting in the kitchen when she emerged, looking like he hadn't slept either. His eyes went immediately to the bag in her hand, and something in his expression crumbled. Elena, please. I'm leaving, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm taking the babies somewhere safe, somewhere far from this world, and I need you to let me go. You can't. He moved toward her, desperate. We can work through this. Whatever you saw last night, but was the truth I've been ignoring for months because I fell in love with you. Tears were streaming down her face now. But love isn't enough, Dominic, not when I have to protect them. Her hands went to her stomach. Not when every day I stay is another day closer to bringing children into a world where their father breaks people. I would never hurt you, never hurt them. I know that. But what about the people who want to hurt you? The enemies you've made, the rivals who'd use us as leverage? Elena's voice broke. Last night I realized, I'm not just your wife anymore. I'm a target. And soon our babies will be targets too. Dominic's face had gone pale. I'll protect you, all of you, with everything I have. You can't protect us from what you are. She moved past him toward the door, each step feeling like her heart was being torn apart. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I have to do this. Don't. His voice was raw, broken. Please, Elena, don't take them from me. Don't take yourself from me. I'll change. You can't change, Dominic. This is who you are, who you've always been. She turned back to look at him one last time, memorizing his face. I love you. I'll probably always love you, but I love them more, and they deserve a chance at a normal life. She left the letter on the kitchen counter, the one she'd written at 3 a.m, her tears blurring the ink. In it, she'd tried to explain everything her voice couldn't say now. The love, the fear, the impossible choice. The elevator doors closed on Dominic standing frozen in the doorway, his expression devastated, and Elena pressed her hand to her mouth to muffle the sobs. Marcus was waiting in the lobby. She expected him to stop her, to call Dominic, to prevent her from leaving. Instead, he handed her an envelope. Mr. Russo asked me to give you this, if you ever decided to leave. Elena's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a bank card and a note in Dominic's precise handwriting. If you're reading this, I've failed you. Take care of yourself. Take care of them. The account has enough to keep you safe for the rest of your life. I'll always love you. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you needed me to be. She looked up at Marcus, tears spilling over. He knew? He knew I might run? Mr. Russo knows you better than you think, Mrs. Russo. He knew what he was. And he knew eventually you'd see it too. Marcus's expression softened, the first real emotion she'd ever seen from him. For what it's worth, I've never seen him happy until you. You gave him something I didn't think he was capable of having. Then why did he? Because he's trying to build something, trying to secure a future where you and those babies are safe. But the work is ugly, and some things can't be explained away. Marcus opened the building's front door. The car is waiting. It'll take you anywhere you want to go. Mister, Russo's orders are that you're not to be followed or tracked. Your freedom is absolute. Elena stumbled to the car, the weight of what she was doing crushing her chest. She'd just walked away from the man she loved, the father of her children, the person who'd shown her what it felt like to be cherished. But she'd also walked away from the darkness, the violence, the world that would swallow her babies whole if she let it. As the car pulled away from the building, Elena looked back one last time. And there, in the penthouse window 50 floors up, she saw him. Dominic. Standing motionless, watching her disappear. She turned away and didn't look back again. The small town in Oregon was everything the city wasn't. Quiet, safe, anonymous. Elena rented a tiny apartment under a new name, Sarah Mitchell, and built a life out of fragments and determination. The money Dominic had given her went into a secure account she barely touched, using only what she needed for rent and essentials. She got a job waitressing at a local diner, working until her pregnancy made it impossible, then switching to remote data entry work she could do from home. The twins were born on a rainy March morning, 7 months after she'd left. 2 perfect boys with dark hair and eyes that would someday be the same deep brown as their fathers. Elena named them Alexander and Lucas. Alex and Luke. Her sons. Her entire world. She didn't contact Dominic, didn't send word about the birth. Every day she thought about it. Imagined calling him, hearing his voice, telling him he had 2 healthy sons who looked just like him. But every time she reached for the phone, she remembered that night. The blood. The broken fingers. The cold efficiency in Dominic's voice. And she put the phone down. The boys grew, 6 months old, then a year. Elena poured everything into them, all the love she'd saved for Dominic, all the hope she'd had for their future together. She took them to the park, read them stories, sang lullabies in the small apartment that was nothing like the penthouse but felt infinitely safer. Some nights, after they were asleep, she'd pull out the ultrasound photos and cry for everything she'd lost, for the man she still loved despite everything, for the family they could have been. But mostly, she told herself she'd made the right choice. The boys were 2 years old when Elena started noticing the car. It was nothing obvious at first, just a dark sedan that seemed to appear on her street more often than coincidence allowed, parked across from the diner, idling near the park where she took the twins. She told herself she was being paranoid, that running from Dominic had made her see threats everywhere. But then the man appeared. He was in the grocery store watching her from the cereal aisle while Alex and Luke babbled in the shopping cart. He was at the park, pretending to read a newspaper while she pushed the boys on the swings. He was always there, always watching, never approaching. Elena's hands shook as she unlocked her apartment door that night, hurrying the twins inside. She checked every window, every lock, her heart pounding with a fear she hadn't felt since the night she'd run. Someone had found her. The question was who and what they wanted. She got her answer 3 days later. Elena was walking home from the grocery store, the boys in their double stroller, when a car pulled up beside her. Not the sedan she'd been seeing, a different car, nicer. The window rolled down, and a woman leaned out. She was elegant, older, with sharp eyes that cataloged everything in seconds. "Mrs. Russo," the woman said, "we need to talk." Elena's blood went cold. "I don't know who you're talking about. Please, don't insult both of us." The woman glanced at the twins. "Those boys look remarkably like their father. It wasn't difficult to find you once we knew what to look for. What do you want?" "Get in the car. We'll talk somewhere private." "I'm not going anywhere with you." The woman's smile was thin. "Then I'll say this here. My name is Victoria Chen. I represent certain business interests that are very interested in Dominic Russo's recent vulnerabilities. And you, my dear, are the biggest vulnerability he has." Elena's hands tightened on the stroller. "I haven't seen Dominic in 3 years. But he's seen you. Oh, he's been very careful not to interfere, not to track you or contact you, but he knows exactly where you are. Has known since the day you left. Victoria's expression turned calculating. Did you really think a man like Dominic Russo would let the mother of his children disappear without keeping tabs? He's been protecting you from a distance, making sure you stay safe and hidden. The revelation hit Elena like a punch. You're lying. Am I? How else do you think a woman with no connections, no references, no real identity was able to rent an apartment, get a job, build a life in a small town where everyone knows everyone? Victoria leaned back. Dominic's been pulling strings, keeping you safe, but his protection only works if his enemies don't know you exist. And now they do. Now we do. Victoria's smile was predatory. Which means you have two choices. You can work with us, provide information about Dominic, help us understand his weaknesses, give us leverage, or you can refuse and will be forced to use more persuasive methods. Elena looked down at her sons, oblivious in their stroller, playing with plastic keys. Everything she'd done, every choice she'd made, had been to keep them safe from this exact situation. And now it had found them anyway. I don't know anything, Elena said. I left 3 years ago. I have no information about Dominic's business. But you have his children. And that, Mrs. Russo, is worth more than any information. Victoria handed her a business card. You have 48 hours to think about it. Call me when you're ready to cooperate. Or don't, and see what happens next. The car drove away, leaving Elena standing on the sidewalk, trembling, the business card burning in her hand. She couldn't go to the police. What would she say? That she was the estranged wife of a crime boss being threatened by his enemies? They'd laugh her out of the station. Or worse, they'd get involved and Dominic would be exposed and everything would come crashing down. She couldn't run again. Victoria had found her once. She'd find her again. Which left only one option, the one she'd sworn she'd never take. That night, after the boys were asleep, Elena pulled out the phone she'd kept hidden for 3 years, the one with a single number programmed into it, the one Dominic had given her on their wedding day with a simple instruction, if you ever need me, use this, day or night, I'll answer. Her finger hovered over the call button. She'd spent 3 years building a life away from him, 3 years convincing herself that she and the boys were better off alone, that Dominic's world was too dangerous, too dark, too violent. But now that world had found them anyway, and she couldn't protect her sons from it alone. Elena pressed call. It rang once, twice. Then, Elena! Dominic's voice rough with emotion and sleep, like he'd been waiting for this call every night for 3 years. I need your help, she whispered. Silence. Then, where are you? She told him everything. Victoria Chen. The threats. The 48-hour deadline. Her voice broke as she described the fear of the last few days, the realization that she'd never been as safe as she thought. Dominic listened without interrupting. When she finished, his voice was deadly calm. Pack a bag, just essentials. I'm sending someone to get you. They'll be there in 3 hours. Dominic, you and the boys are in danger because of me. Because I wasn't careful enough, and someone figured out what you mean to me. His voice roughened. I'm going to fix this, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Elena looked at her sleeping sons, their dark hair messy against the pillows, their faces peaceful and innocent. Yes, she said. I trust you. Good. Marcus will be there soon. He'll bring you somewhere safe. And Elena? Yeah? I'm sorry for everything, for being the reason you had to run, for not being the man you needed, for... He stopped, his breath shaky. I'm just sorry. I know, Elena whispered. I'm sorry too. She hung up and started packing. Marcus arrived exactly 3 hours later, looking the same as he had 3 years ago. He nodded at Elena, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes went soft when he saw the twins. Mr. Russo's sons, he said quietly. Alex and Luke, Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. They look like him. I know. Marcus helped her load the bags into the car, then carefully secured the twins' car seats. Alex woke up briefly, fussing, and Marcus handed him a stuffed animal with surprising gentleness. Where are we going? Elena asked as they pulled away from the apartment. Somewhere Victoria Chen and her people will never find you. Mr. Russo has been preparing for this possibility since the day you left. He knew this would happen? He knew someone would eventually figure out what you meant to him. He spent the last 3 years making sure he was ready to protect you when they did. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror. He never stopped loving you, Mrs. Russo. He just loved you enough to let you go. Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, emotions overwhelming her. They drove through the night, the twins sleeping peacefully in their car seats, unaware that their lives were changing again. Elena watched the dark landscape blur past, thinking about Dominic, about the choice she'd made 3 years ago, about the choice she was making now. She'd run to protect her children. Now she was running back to do the same thing. The safe house was in the mountains, isolated and beautiful, surrounded by trees and silence. Marcus pulled up to a cabin that looked rustic from the outside, but was clearly reinforced and secured. "Mr. Russo will be here tomorrow," Marcus said, helping her unload. "Until then, you're safe. The property has security measures in place. No one gets in or out without authorization." Elena carried a sleeping Luke inside while Marcus brought Alex. The cabin was warm, well-stocked, with a bedroom already set up for the twins, cribs, toys, everything they'd need. Someone had been planning this, preparing for the day she might come back. Dominic. After Marcus left, Elena settled the boys in their cribs and stood watching them sleep. Tomorrow they'd meet their father for the first time. Tomorrow, everything would change again. She just hoped she was ready for it. The sun was setting when Dominic arrived. Elena heard the car, felt her heart start to race. The boys were playing in the living room, building towers with blocks, laughing as they knocked them down. She opened the door before he could knock. 3 years. 3 years since she'd seen him, touched him, heard his voice in person instead of through a phone line in the middle of the night. He looked the same. Older maybe, with new lines around his eyes, but still Dominic. Still the man she'd fallen in love with. "Elena," he said, and her name in his voice still sounded like a prayer. "Hi." They stood there, 3 feet and 3 years between them, neither knowing how to bridge the distance. Then, from behind her, "Mama?" Elena turned to see Alex toddling over, curious about the stranger. Luke was right behind him, always following his brother's lead. Dominic's expression shattered. He dropped to his knees, his eyes locked on the boys, his hands shaking. "These are our sons." "Alex and Luke," Elena said softly. "Boys, this is your father." Alex, braver than his brother, moved closer. He studied Dominic with serious brown eyes, Dominic's eyes, then reached out to touch his face. "Dada?" he said uncertainly. Dominic's breath caught. "Yes, I'm your Dada." Luke, encouraged by his brother, came forward too, and Dominic gathered them both close, his arms around them, his face pressed to their hair, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Elena's own tears spilled over. Watching this reunion, she'd denied them all for 3 years. When Dominic finally looked up at her, his eyes were red but clear. "Thank you for calling me, for trusting me with them. They deserve to know their father, and Elena's voice broke. "I can't keep them safe alone. I tried, but your world found us anyway." Dominic stood, still holding the boys, both of them now comfortable in his arms like they'd known him forever. "I'm going to end this. Victoria Chen and everyone like her, they'll never threaten you again. I promise you that." "How?" "By doing what I should have done 3 years ago." His expression hardened. "By becoming someone worthy of this, of you, of them." He spent the evening with the boys, playing with them, learning their personalities, soaking in 3 years of missed moments. Alex was bold and adventurous. Luke was quieter, more thoughtful. They both had Dominic's smile, his determination, his quick intelligence. After they were asleep, Elena and Dominic sat on the porch, the night air cool and clear. "I've been dismantling it," Dominic said quietly. "My empire. For the last 2 years, I've been systematically taking apart everything I built, selling off operations, cutting ties, moving into legitimate business." Elena stared at him. "Why?" "Because you were right. That night you left, you were right about everything. I couldn't be the father those boys deserved while I was that man, so I decided to become someone else." He looked at her, his expression raw. "It's almost done. Another 6 months, maybe less, and I'll be completely clean, legal, safe. Dominic, I'm not asking you to come back to me. I'm not asking for another chance. I just needed you to know that I heard you, that I'm trying to be the man you needed me to be, even if it's too late. Elena's hand found his in the darkness. What if it's not too late? His fingers tightened around hers. Don't. Don't give me hope unless you mean it. I ran because I was terrified, because I saw the worst of you and couldn't reconcile it with the man I loved. She turned to face him fully. But these last 3 years without you, they've been safe. They've been quiet, and they've been so lonely I could barely breathe sometimes. Elena, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I love you. I never stopped. And if you're really changing, really becoming someone different, then maybe we can find a way back to each other. Not now, not immediately, but someday. Dominic pulled her close, his arms around her, his face in her hair. I'll wait as long as it takes, forever if I have to. They held each other in the darkness. 3 years of separation finally bridged, hope flickering between them like a fragile flame. The next morning, Victoria Chen's threat came to a head. Elena woke to find Dominic already up, on the phone, his expression grim. What's wrong? Victoria made her move. She's threatening to expose my past operations unless I give her control of my territory. He set down the phone. She thinks she has leverage. She thinks I'll sacrifice everything to protect you and the boys. What are you going to do? Dominic's smile was cold and dangerous. I'm going to show her exactly why threatening my family was the worst mistake of her life. Elena watched him make calls, mobilize resources, become the man she'd seen that terrible night 3 years ago. Except now, that power wasn't directed at torture victims. It was directed at protecting what mattered. Stay here with the boys, he said, kissing her forehead. Marcus will keep you safe. I'll be back by tonight. Dominic, trust me, please. She did. Against all logic, despite everything, she trusted him completely. He left, and Elena spent the day with the twins, trying not to think about what was happening, what Dominic was doing to keep them safe. He returned at sunset, looking tired but satisfied. It's done, he said. Victoria Chen has been neutralized. Her organization is scattered, and I made it very clear to everyone in that world that my family is permanently off limits. How? By showing them the evidence I've been collecting for 2 years. Every crime, every operation, every illegal deal. I handed it all over to the FBI with immunity in exchange for my cooperation. He met her eyes. I told you I was becoming someone else. Today was the final step. Elena's breath caught. You're out, completely out, completely. The empire is gone, sold off or shut down. I'm just Dominic Russo now, businessman, father. He paused. Man trying to earn back the woman he loves. She crossed the room and kissed him, deep and thorough and full of everything she'd been holding back for 3 years. You don't have to earn me back, she whispered against his lips. You already have me. You've always had me. The kiss deepened, 3 years of longing and regret and desperate love pouring between them. Dominic's hands framed her face like she was something infinitely precious, and Elena pressed closer, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. I meant what I said, he murmured. I'll wait as long as you need. We can take this slowly. Build trust again. I don't want slow, Elena said, her fingers tangling in his shirt. I've had 3 years of slow. 3 years of safe and careful and lonely. I want this. I want you. I want us. Elena, I know it won't be easy. I know there's damage we need to repair, but I also know that I've never stopped being yours. She pulled back to meet his eyes. And those boys in there deserve to grow up with both their parents, together. Dominic's expression was raw with hope and fear. Are you sure? Because if we do this, if we try again, I need you to promise me something. What? That you won't run, no matter what happens, no matter how scared you get. We talk about it. We work through it. But you don't disappear again. His voice cracked. I barely survived losing you once. I won't survive it twice. Elena's hand covered his heart. I promise. No more running. We face everything together. Together, he repeated like he was testing the word, learning to believe in it again. They spent that night talking, really talking, about everything that had happened in the 3 years apart. Dominic told her about the painstaking process of dismantling his empire, the enemies he'd had to neutralize, the legitimate businesses he'd built to replace the criminal ones. He'd sold off properties, severed ties with dangerous allies, systematically erased the infrastructure that had made him one of the most powerful men in the city's underworld. It wasn't just about becoming legal, he said, his hand unconsciously moving to trace patterns on her arm as they sat together on the couch. It was about becoming the kind of man who could look his sons in the eye and tell them he was someone worth respecting, someone who chose a different path. That must have been dangerous, Elena said, walking away from that world. It was. There were people who saw it as weakness, who tried to take advantage. His jaw tightened. But I'd already lost you, already spent 3 years knowing my children were growing up without me. What did I have left to lose? Elena thought about her own 3 years. The small apartment, the waitressing job, the lonely nights after the boys were asleep. I told myself I was protecting them, that keeping them away from your world was the right choice. It was the right choice. At the time. Dominic pulled her closer. I was still that man then, still breaking fingers and making threats. You saw the worst of me, and you made the only decision a good mother could make. But I also ran because I was scared, not just of your world, but of how much I loved you despite everything. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. I was terrified that love would make me weak, that I'd compromise everything, my morals, my children's safety, just to stay with you. And now? Now I know that love doesn't have to make you weak. It can make you stronger, braver. She met his eyes. You changed your entire life because you loved us. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Dominic kissed her again, slow and sweet, and for the first time in 3 years, Elena felt complete. The days that followed established a new rhythm. Dominic stayed at this cabin, spending every moment he could with Alex and Luke. Watching him with their sons was a revelation. He was patient and playful, getting down on the floor to build block towers, reading stories with different voices for each character, teaching them simple words with the same focused intensity he'd once applied to running an empire. Dada, Luke said one morning, tugging on Dominic's sleeve. Up. Dominic's face lit up like Christmas morning. He scooped Luke into his arms, pressing a kiss to his dark hair. Up we go, buddy. Elena watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart swelling. This was what she'd been afraid they'd never have. A father who was present, engaged, utterly devoted to his children. He's a natural, Marcus said quietly, appearing beside her. He'd been staying in the guest house on the property, maintaining security while giving them space to rebuild their family. I didn't expect him to be, Elena admitted. I thought maybe the violence in him would extend to everything, but with them, he's so gentle. Mr. Russo has always understood the value of what he protects. He's just never had anything worth protecting the way he protects those boys. Marcus paused. The way he protects you. He told me about the immunity deal, about cooperating with the FBI. That was his final card. The one thing he swore he'd never do, turn on the world he'd built. But he did it without hesitation when Victoria Chen threatened you. Elena's throat tightened. I spent 3 years thinking I'd made the right choice leaving. But maybe all I did was make us both miserable. You made the choice you had to make with the information you had, and it led to this. Marcus gestured to where Dominic was now teaching both boys to stack blocks in a specific pattern. To him becoming someone better. That's not nothing, Mrs. Russo. But the piece they'd found was fragile, and Elena knew it. The first crack appeared a week later, when Elena woke in the middle of the night to find Dominic's side of the bed empty. She found him in the living room, staring out at the dark forest, tension radiating from every line of his body. Can't sleep? She asked softly. He didn't turn around. I keep thinking about what could have happened. If Victoria had gotten to you before I could mobilize, if she'd hurt you or the boys to get to me. But she didn't. We're safe. This time. Now he looked at her, his expression haunted. But there are others out there. People who know what you mean to me. The immunity deal protects me legally, but it doesn't erase the enemies I made over 15 years of running that empire. Elena crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. So what do we do? Live in fear forever? Keep running? No. We make sure they understand that touching my family means total annihilation, not just of them, but of everything they've built. His voice was cold, controlled, a flash of the old Dominic. I may not be in that world anymore, but I still have resources, connections. I can make examples. Dominic, I won't let anyone hurt you again. I can't. Elena cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I know you want to protect us, but you can't become that person again. Not after everything you've sacrificed to leave that behind. Then what do you want me to do? Just hope that no one else comes after you? I want you to trust that we're stronger together than any threat out there. I want you to believe that the life you're building for us is worth more than revenge or intimidation. She pressed her forehead to his. I want you to choose us, not just with your actions, but with your heart. The tension slowly drained from Dominic's shoulders. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight, enough that she could feel his heart racing. I'm trying, he said roughly. I'm trying to be better, but the instincts are still there. The need to eliminate threats before they materialize. I know, but you're not alone in this anymore. When those instincts take over, you talk to me. We figure it out together. Elena pulled back to look at him. That's what partners do. Partners, he repeated, a small smile touching his lips. I like the sound of that. They went back to bed, wrapped in each other's arms, and Dominic finally slept. But Elena lay awake, recognizing the truth they were both dancing around. Dominic had left his empire behind, but the man who'd built it was still there, buried under layers of love and good intentions. And sooner or later, something would test whether the transformation was real or just an illusion they were both desperate to believe. The test came sooner than either of them expected. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Victoria Chen, Marcus received intelligence that remnants of her organization were regrouping. They'd lost their leader, but the structure remained, and they were angry. They're planning retaliation, Marcus told Dominic and Elena over breakfast, his expression grim. The boys were in the living room, safely out of earshot. My sources say they've put a price on your head, Mr. Russo, and on Mrs. Russo's. Elena's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. How much? Enough to attract serious attention, professional attention. Dominic's hand found hers under the table, steady and warm. How long do we have? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Marcus met Dominic's eyes. I can mobilize security, lock down this location, but it's only a matter of time before someone with the right skills finds you. Then we don't stay here. Dominic's voice was calm, controlled, his crisis mode. We disappear, completely. New identities, new location, total radio silence. For how long? Elena asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Weeks? Months? Years? How long do we run before we can actually live? As long as it takes to keep you and the boys safe? That's not living, Dominic. That's surviving. And I didn't leave one cage to walk into another. His jaw tightened. What would you have me do? Let them come? Risk everything because you're tired of running? I'm saying there has to be another way. You spent 2 years dismantling your empire. You have resources, connections, leverage. Use them. End this permanently instead of just postponing it. And how do you suggest I do that without becoming the man you left 3 years ago? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and accusing. Elena pulled her hand away, standing up from the table. I don't know, she said, but I know hiding forever isn't the answer. Those boys deserve a real life. We all do. She walked away, leaving Dominic staring after her, frustration and fear warring in his expression. Marcus cleared his throat. Mrs. Russo has a point. Running is a temporary solution. Eventually, you'll have to face this head-on. I know, Dominic said quietly, but facing it head-on means using methods I swore I'd never use again. It means stepping back into that darkness. With respect, sir, you never fully left the darkness. You just learned to live in the light alongside it. Marcus stood. The question isn't whether you're capable of handling this. You are. The question is whether you can do it without losing yourself in the process. Dominic spent the rest of the day in his office, the small room he'd converted into a workspace, making calls, pulling strings, activating networks he'd thought were permanently dormant. Elena heard his voice through the door, sometimes calm and businesslike, sometimes cold and threatening. He was negotiating, bargaining, leveraging old debts and outstanding favors. He was being the man he used to be. When he finally emerged at dinner time, he looked exhausted. The boys ran to him immediately, and he scooped them both up, burying his face in their hair like they were his anchor to humanity. "Dada tired?" Alex asked, patting Dominic's cheek. "Yeah, buddy, Dada's tired." "We play tomorrow?" "We play tomorrow," Dominic promised, his voice thick with emotion. Elena made dinner while Dominic played with the boys, the domestic normalcy feeling surreal against the backdrop of death threats and hired assassins. After the twins were in bed, she found Dominic on the porch again, his usual thinking spot. "Did you fix it?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I bought us time. Maybe 3 months, maybe 6. I've got people working on identifying everyone involved in Victoria's organization, and I've made it clear that any action against my family will result in comprehensive retaliation." "Comprehensive retaliation," Elena repeated. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll destroy them. Completely. Legally where possible, less legally where necessary." He met her eyes. "I know you don't want me to be that man anymore, but that man is the only reason we're still alive. I'm not asking you to be helpless, Dominic. I'm asking you to find a balance, to use your power without letting it consume you. What if there is no balance? What if the price of keeping you safe is becoming someone you can't love?" Elena took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I love you. Not the empire you built or the power you wielded. You. The man who cries when his sons say Dada, who spent 2 years systematically destroying everything he'd created just for the chance to be worthy of us. That's who I love. Even when that man has to make hard choices, dangerous choices, even then, as long as you're making them for the right reasons." She kissed him softly. "Just don't lose yourself in the darkness. Come back to us. Always come back to us." "I will," he promised. "I swear to you I will." The months that followed were a strange mix of ordinary life and underlying tension. Dominic worked from the cabin, managing his legitimate businesses remotely while also coordinating the quiet dismantling of Victoria Chen's remnant organization. He was careful to keep Elena and the boys insulated from the details, but she could see the weight of it in the tightness around his eyes, the way he'd wake up at night and check the security feeds before he could fall back asleep. But during the day, he was fully present. He taught Alex and Luke to identify birds in the forest. He built them a tree house with Marcus's help. He read them bedtime stories and made silly voices and let them climb all over him like a jungle gym. He was becoming the father Elena had always hoped he could be, and at night, after the boys were asleep, he was the husband she'd fallen in love with all over again. They talked for hours, making up for lost time. They made love slowly, relearning each other's bodies, building new memories on top of the old ones. They planned a future that felt increasingly possible, a house somewhere quiet, maybe by the ocean, where the boys could grow up without fear. "I want to marry you again," Dominic said one night, both of them tangled in sheets, moonlight streaming through the window. "Not a contract this time, a real wedding, with vows that mean something." Elena's breath caught. "We're already married, legally. But I want to marry you because I choose you, because you're mine and I'm yours, and nothing, not my past, not my mistakes, not the entire world, can change that." He rolled over to face her, his expression serious. "Will you marry me, Elena? Again? For real this time?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He kissed her, deep and claiming, and Elena felt the last pieces of her broken heart finally click back into place. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The attack came on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after Victoria Chen's organization had been neutralized. Elena was in the kitchen making breakfast while Dominic played with the boys in the living room. The first sign something was wrong was the security alarm, a sharp, piercing sound that sent ice through her veins. Dominic was on his feet instantly, the boys in his arms. "Elena, get to the safe room, now." "What's happening?" "Now." The command in his voice left no room for argument. Marcus appeared from the guest house, weapon drawn, his expression grim. 3 vehicles, at least 6 hostiles. They're coming up the access road." Dominic handed the boys to Elena, his eyes fierce. Safe room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marcus, understand? Dominic, I love you. All of you. Now go. Elena ran, the boys clutching her neck, their frightened whimpers breaking her heart. The safe room was hidden behind a bookshelf in the master bedroom, Dominic's paranoia made manifest. She pulled it open, carried the boys inside, and locked the reinforced door behind them. The room was small but well stocked. Food, water, first aid supplies. A monitor showing feeds from the security cameras. Elena pulled up the feed showing the front of the cabin just as the first shots rang out. She watched in horror as 6 men in tactical gear approached the cabin, weapons raised. Marcus was returning fire from behind the porch railing, his movements precise and controlled. But where was Dominic? The answer came seconds later when Dominic appeared from the side of the cabin, moving with lethal efficiency. He wasn't armed with a gun. Instead, he had something in his hand that Elena couldn't quite make out. He threw it, and one of the tactical team went down, screaming. Another throw. Another man down. Dominic was fighting like someone who'd spent his entire life in violence. And Elena realized with sick certainty that this was who he'd been before her. This was the man who'd built an empire through fear and force. This was the monster she'd run from. But he was using that violence to protect their children, to protect her. The boys were crying now, scared by the sounds of gunfire, even through the safe room's soundproofing. Elena gathered them close, pressing kisses to their heads, whispering reassurances she didn't feel. It's okay, babies. Dada's going to keep us safe. It's okay. On the monitor, the fight was brutal and efficient. Marcus took down 2 more men with precise shots. Dominic disarmed another, using the man's own weapon against him with devastating effectiveness. Then Elena saw what Dominic had been throwing, small devices that exploded on impact, not enough to kill but enough to incapacitate, non-lethal weapons. Even now, even in the middle of an attack, Dominic was trying to stay in the light. The fight lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, all 6 attackers were down, alive but neutralized. Marcus was bleeding from a shoulder wound, but he was standing, and Dominic was running toward the cabin, toward the safe room, his face a mask of desperate fear. Elena heard him outside the door. Elena, open up, it's me. She unlocked the door with shaking hands, and Dominic burst in, dropping to his knees in front of her and the boys. Are you hurt? Did anyone get inside? Are you... We're fine, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. We're okay. Dominic pulled them all into his arms, his whole body shaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought we had more time. I thought... You saved us, Elena interrupted, her hands cupping his face. You kept us safe. Dada's scared, Luke whimpered, and Dominic's expression crumbled. I know, buddy. I'm sorry. It's over now. No one's going to hurt you. I promise. Marcus appeared in the doorway, still bleeding. Local authorities are en route. I called it in as a home invasion. The men are alive but unconscious. We have maybe 10 minutes to get the story straight. Dominic stood, still holding Alex while Elena clutched Luke. Tell them the truth. Armed men attacked my home. We defended ourselves. The weapons I used are all legally registered. And the bodies of Victoria Chen's organization are a problem for tomorrow. Right now we make sure my family is safe, and this gets handled legally. The next hours were chaos. Police, paramedics, crime scene investigators. Dominic gave his statement with the calm authority of someone who dealt with law enforcement before, which Elena realized he had, just usually on the other side. The boys were examined by paramedics and declared physically unharmed, though traumatized. Elena held them close, her mind spinning, trying to process what had just happened. They'd been attacked, in their home, their sanctuary. And Dominic had fought back with a controlled violence that reminded her exactly who he used to be. After the authorities finally left, after the cabin was declared a crime scene and they'd been relocated to a hotel under police protection, Elena put the boys to bed and found Dominic on the balcony. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. I know what you saw. I know it reminded you of... You saved our lives, Elena interrupted. You and Marcus fought off 6 armed men to protect us. That's what I saw. Dominic turned to face her, his expression raw. I used non-lethal weapons. I tried so hard to do it the right way. But in that moment, when I knew they were coming for you and the boys, I would have killed them, all of them, without hesitation, without regret. I know. Does that scare you? Elena considered the question honestly. A little, but it also makes me understand something I didn't before. What's that? That you can't completely erase who you were. That man, the one who built an empire, who commanded fear, he's still in there. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need him erased. We just need him controlled, directed, used only when necessary. Dominic's hands found hers. You're saying you accept all of me? Even the parts that are dangerous? I'm saying I love all of you. The gentle father, the devoted husband, and yes, the dangerous man who'll do whatever it takes to protect his family. She moved closer, her forehead resting against his. Just promise me you'll always come back from that darkness, that you won't let it consume you. I promise, he said fiercely. You and those boys, you're my light. As long as I have you, I'll always find my way back. They held each other on the balcony as the city lights twinkled below, and Elena understood that this was their reality now. Not perfect, not safe, but real and honest, and theirs. The attack changed everything and nothing all at once. The investigation moved swiftly. The 6 men who'd assaulted the cabin were identified as mercenaries with ties to what remained of Victoria Chen's network, a final, desperate attempt at revenge that had backfired spectacularly. With Dominic's cooperation and the physical evidence from the scene, the authorities dismantled the last remnants of the organization within 2 weeks. But the real change wasn't external. It was in the way Elena looked at Dominic now, with full understanding of who he was and who he'd been, accepting both without flinching. It was in the way Dominic carried himself around the boys, no longer trying to hide his protective instincts, but channeling them into something constructive. And it was in the decision they made together, 3 days after the attack, sitting in the hotel room while the boys napped. We can't keep living like this, Elena said, her hand in Dominic's. Always waiting for the next threat, always looking over our shoulders. I know, I've been thinking the same thing. So what do we do? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. We finish what I started, completely. I still have one connection left to my old life. One person who knows where all the bodies are buried, who has leverage on everyone who might ever come after us. Who? Me. He met her eyes. I've been gathering evidence for 2 years. Everything I know about every major player in that world. I was saving it as insurance, but maybe it's time to use it differently. How? By giving it all to the FBI. Not just Victoria Chen's people, but everyone. Every criminal organization I ever worked with. Every corrupt official I ever paid off. Every dirty deal I ever witnessed. His voice was steady, determined. I burn it all down. Leave nothing standing that could ever threaten you or the boys. Elena's breath caught. That's dangerous. Those people, they'll want you dead for betraying them. They already want me dead. At least this way they'll be in prison when they try. He squeezed her hand. It's the only way to be truly free, Elena. To give our sons a life where they're not defined by my past. What about witness protection? Won't you need to eat? I've already negotiated the terms. Full immunity for my testimony. No protection necessary because everyone I testify against will be locked up. He paused. It'll take time, trials, depositions, months of legal proceedings, but at the end of it, we'll be free. Elena studied his face, seeing the resolve there. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything, except loving you. She kissed him, slow and deep, tasting commitment and courage and hope. Then let's do it. Let's burn it all down and start over. The next morning, Dominic met with federal prosecutors. He handed over everything, financial records, recorded conversations, photographs, witness statements. 15 years of criminal activity across dozens of organizations, meticulously documented and devastating in its comprehensiveness. The FBI called it the most significant organized crime intelligence coup in decades. Dominic called it freedom. But freedom, they quickly learned, came with a price. The first trial started 2 months later. Dominic took the stand in a federal courthouse, facing down men who'd once been allies, and methodically destroyed their defenses with facts and evidence. Elena sat in the gallery, watching him navigate questions with the same controlled precision he brought to everything else, and felt fierce pride mixed with lingering fear. Because these men had power too, had connections. And being in prison didn't mean they couldn't reach out and hurt the people Dominic loved. Security around their family became ironclad. Marcus coordinated with federal marshals to establish protocols. The boys, now nearly 3 years old, had their own protection detail whenever they left the safe house. A new one, purchased under layers of corporate entities that Dominic had set up specifically to hide their location. It was exhausting, limiting, sometimes suffocating, but it was also temporary. Elena held on to that thought during the long days when Dominic was in court, when she was stuck inside with two energetic toddlers who didn't understand why they couldn't go to the park anymore. "Mama, when Dada come home?" Luke asked one evening, his small face pressed against the window. "Soon, baby. He'll be home soon." Alex, ever his brother's protector, wrapped an arm around Luke's shoulders. "Dada fighting bad guys, make us safe." Elena's throat tightened. "That's right. He's making us safe." Dominic came home late that night, looking drained. The boys were already asleep, but Elena had waited up, curled on the couch with a book she wasn't really reading. "How did it go?" she asked as he sank down beside her. "Guilty on all counts. Malcolm Torres is going away for 25 years minimum." He scrubbed his hands over his face. 3 down, 7 more to go." 7 more trials. 7 more weeks of testimony and threats, and reliving the worst parts of his past. Elena set aside her book and moved into his lap, wrapping her arms around him. "You're doing the right thing." "I keep telling myself that, but some days I wonder if I'm just trading one kind of prison for another. You and the boys, trapped in this house because of choices I made a decade ago." "We're not trapped. We're protected. There's a difference." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "And once this is over, once all those men are behind bars, we'll have the rest of our lives to be free." "I want to give you the world, Elena. I want to take the boys to the beach, teach them to swim, show them all the places I've been. I want us to have a normal life." "We will. I promise. We will." He held her tighter, and Elena felt the tremor in his hands, the weight of everything he was carrying finally showing through the cracks. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly, "that by the time this is over, you'll have realized you're better off without me, that the boys will have forgotten who I am." "That's not going to happen." "How can you be so sure?" "Because they ask for you every night before bed. Because Alex tells everyone he meets that his Dada is a superhero. Because Luke saves his best hugs for when you come home." Elena pressed her forehead to his. "And because I fall more in love with you every single day. The you who's fighting to make things right. The you who calls me between court sessions just to hear my voice. The you who's sacrificing everything to give our children a better future." Dominic's kiss was desperate, grateful, full of everything words couldn't express. They made love that night with an urgency born of fear and hope tangled together, clinging to each other like lifelines in a storm. The trials continued. 4 months, then 6. Dominic testified in case after case, his testimony sending dozens of criminals to prison. The prosecutor called him their star witness. The defense attorneys called him a traitor. The media called him the man who brought down an empire. Elena just called him hers. The boys adapted with the resilience of children. They made a game of the security measures, pretending the guards were friendly dragons protecting their castle. They video called their grandmother weekly, Elena's mother cooing over how big they'd gotten, how much they looked like their father. "When are you coming home?" her mother asked during one call. "We miss you, all of you." Elena glanced at Dominic, who was building a block tower with Alex and Luke across the room. "Soon, Mom. Just a few more months." This has something to do with Dominic's work, doesn't it? The real work, not the business he tells me about. Elena had never fully explained her marriage to her parents, just that she'd fallen in love, gotten married quickly, had babies. They knew Dominic was wealthy, powerful, protective. They didn't know where that power came from. "He's making things right," Elena said carefully. "It's complicated, but he's doing everything he can to give us a safe future." "I always knew there was something about him, something dangerous." Her mother's voice softened. "But the way he looks at you in photos, the way he talks about those boys, That's real love, Elena. Whatever else he is, he loves you. I know, Mom. I love him too. After she hung up, Dominic appeared beside her. Everything okay? She suspects you're not just a businessman. Smart woman. He kissed her temple. Want me to tell her the truth when this is all over? Elena considered it. Maybe. Or maybe we just let the past stay buried and focus on the future. I like the sound of that. The break came in month 7, during the trial of Anthony Castellano, the last and most dangerous of the men Dominic was testifying against. Castellano had been Dominic's primary rival during his time running the organization, a brutal enforcer who'd built his own empire on violence and fear. Dominic had documented everything. The murders Castellano had ordered, the witnesses he'd intimidated, the politicians he'd corrupted. It should have been an open and shut case. But Castellano had resources, had loyalty, had reach that extended beyond prison walls. The threat came in the form of a photograph slipped under their safe house door in the middle of the night. Marcus found it during his morning security sweep and immediately brought it to Dominic. Elena watched her husband's face go pale as he stared at the image. "What is it?" she asked, fear coiling in her stomach. Dominic handed her the photo without a word. It was Alex and Luke, playing in the safe house's backyard. Yesterday afternoon. Someone had been watching. Someone had gotten close enough to take pictures of their children. Elena's hands shook so badly the photo fluttered to the floor. "How? We have security. We have protocols." "It doesn't matter how." Dominic's voice was ice cold, controlled fury barely contained. "What matters is they got this close to our sons. And if they can take a picture, they can do worse." Marcus was already on his phone, mobilizing additional security, running trace analysis on the photo. But Elena could see the calculation in Dominic's eyes, the shift from civilized man to something far more dangerous. "Don't," she said sharply. "Whatever you're thinking, don't do it." "They threatened our children, Elena. And you're going to testify against Castellano in 3 days. You're going to put him away for life using the legal system, like we agreed." She gripped his arm. "You're not going to throw everything away by doing something stupid. What if the legal system isn't enough? What if he finds a way to reach them even from prison? Then we deal with it together, legally, the right way." Elena's voice shook but held firm. "I know you want to protect us. I know every instinct you have is screaming at you to eliminate the threat. But you've come so far, sacrificed so much. Don't let him drag you back into that darkness." Dominic pulled her close, his arms tight around her. "I can't lose you. I can't lose them." "You won't, because we're going to be smart about this. We're going to trust the system we've been building for 7 months." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "And we're going to win." The next 72 hours were the longest of Elena's life. Security tripled. The boys weren't allowed outside. Federal marshals swept the property hourly. And Dominic prepared for the testimony that would either end Castellano's power forever or make him an even more dangerous enemy. The morning of the trial, Elena helped Dominic with his tie, her hands steadier than she felt. "You look handsome," she said, adjusting his collar. "I look tired." "You look like a man who's about to save his family." She kissed him softly. "I'm proud of you. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that." "I love you," Dominic said fiercely. "You and those boys. You're everything. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, you take the boys and you run. There's money set aside, new identities prepared. Marcus knows where everything is. Dominic, promise me, Elena. Promise me you'll protect them, no matter what." She saw the fear in his eyes, the desperate love. "I promise, but you're coming home to us. You're going to testify, put that monster away, and come home. We're going to have that life we've been planning. Understand?" He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and kissed her like it might be the last time. It wasn't. Dominic's testimony was devastating. He spoke for 6 hours, detailing every crime Castellano had committed, every life he'd destroyed. The evidence was irrefutable. The jury's faces showed horror and disgust. When the guilty verdict came back 3 days later, Castellano's expression was murderous. But he was led away in chains, his power broken, his organization dismantled, and Dominic came home to his family. Elena met him at the door, the boys in her arms, tears streaming down her face. It's over? Really over? It's over, Dominic confirmed, his own eyes bright. Castellano got life without parole. The others are serving decades, and the FBI confirmed that without their leadership, the remnant organizations have dissolved. So we're free? We're free. Elena set down the boys, who immediately launched themselves at their father. Dominic caught them both, holding them tight, his face buried in their hair. We did it, he said, his voice muffled. We're safe now. All of us. That night, after the boys were asleep and the celebration had quieted, Dominic and Elena stood on their balcony looking out at the stars. What now? Elena asked. What do we do with our freedom? We live, Dominic said simply. We find a house by the ocean like you wanted. We raise our sons to be good men. We grow old together. He turned to face her, pulling a small box from his pocket. And we do this properly. Elena's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring. Not the simple band she'd worn during their contract marriage, but something beautiful and meaningful. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the deep blue matching her eyes. I asked you to marry me once before, Dominic said, dropping to one knee despite the fact that they were already married, despite everything. But that was when I was still becoming the man I wanted to be. Now I'm asking again. Marry me, Elena. Not because of a contract or obligation or fear. Marry me because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Because you saved me from myself. Because you gave me a family I don't deserve but will spend the rest of my life earning. Elena was crying, her hands covering her mouth. We're already married, you idiot. Then marry me again, in front of our families, in front of the boys, in front of everyone who matters, so they know you're mine and I'm yours, and nothing will ever change that. Yes, Elena sobbed, pulling him to his feet. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, just like they did, despite all the broken edges and hard-won healing. The wedding happened 2 months later, on a beach in California with sand between their toes and the sun setting over the ocean. Elena wore a simple white dress. The boys wore tiny suits and carried the rings down the aisle with Marcus's help, beaming at the crowd of family and friends who'd come to celebrate. Elena's parents were there, her mother crying through the entire ceremony. Dominic's uncle attended too, the man who'd raised him, looking older now but proud of the transformation his nephew had made. When it came time for the vows, Dominic took Elena's hands and spoke from the heart. The first time we married, I was buying your compliance. Today, I'm choosing your love. You've given me everything, a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than I ever thought I could be. I promise to protect you, to honor you, to wake up every day and choose you again. I promise to be the father our sons deserve and the partner you've always needed. I promise to live in the light you've shown me, and if I ever slip into darkness, to trust you to guide me back. I love you, Elena, today, tomorrow, forever. Elena's own vows were simpler but no less powerful. I choose you, Dominic, not because I have to, but because there's no one else I'd rather build a life with. You've shown me that people can change, that love can heal the deepest wounds, that family is something you create, not something you're born into. I promise to stand beside you through everything, to be your partner, your love, your home. I choose you. Always. When the officiant pronounced them married, again, the kiss was met with cheers and applause. The boys ran up to hug their parents' legs, and Dominic scooped them both up, pulling Elena close with his free arm, creating a family portrait of joy and hope and hard-won happiness. The reception lasted until the stars came out. They danced on the beach, ate cake with the boys, laughed with friends who'd supported them through the darkest times. And late that night, after the guests had gone and the boys were asleep in their hotel room under Marcus's watchful eye, Dominic and Elena walked along the shoreline hand in hand. I bought a house, Dominic said suddenly. What? A house. Here, actually, on this beach. He pointed to a structure in the distance, warm lights glowing in the windows. 4 bedrooms, big kitchen, yard for the boys to play in. Close enough to the city for work, but far enough for privacy. Elena stopped walking, staring at him. When did you do this? Last month. I wanted it to be a surprise. He tugged her toward the house. Want to see it? They walked up the beach together, and Dominic unlocked the door to reveal a beautiful beach house with hardwood floors and big windows and a stone fireplace. It was warm and welcoming and absolutely perfect. "This is ours?" Elena breathed. "This is ours. Our home, where we'll raise the boys, where we'll grow old, where we'll build all those memories we've been dreaming about." He pulled her close. "Welcome home, Mrs. Russo." Elena laughed through her tears. "I love it. I love you. I love all of this." They christened their new home that night, making love in the master bedroom with ocean sounds drifting through the open windows, and Elena felt more complete than she ever had before. The years that followed were everything they'd fought for. Dominic's legitimate businesses thrived, providing more than enough income for their family. He started a foundation that helped at-risk youth find alternatives to crime, paying forward the second chance Elena had given him. The boys grew from toddlers to children, energetic and bright, and blissfully unaware of the darkness that had preceded their peaceful childhood. They learned to swim in the ocean. They built sand castles and collected shells and asked 1,000 questions about everything. Alex remained the bold one, always pushing boundaries, always leading his quieter brother into adventures. Luke was thoughtful and artistic, drawing pictures of his family that Dominic proudly displayed in his office. Elena went back to school, finally finishing her literature degree. She started teaching part-time at a local community college, sharing her love of stories with students who reminded her of her younger self, struggling, uncertain, but full of potential. And through it all, she and Dominic built a partnership that went deeper than romance. They were partners in parenting, in business, in life. They had arguments and makeups, challenges and triumphs, ordinary days and extraordinary moments. 5 years after the wedding on the beach, Elena discovered she was pregnant again. "Another one?" Dominic said, his hand on her still flat stomach, wonder in his voice. "Are you upset?" "Are you kidding? I'm thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He kissed her. "Girl or boy, what do you think?" "Girl, definitely a girl. To even out the testosterone in this house." He laughed. "A daughter, I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You've got 9 months to get ready." Their daughter, Sophia, was born on a sunny morning in May. She had Elena's eyes and Dominic's determination, and from the moment she entered the world, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Watching Dominic with Sophia, the gentle way he held her, the songs he sang, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, Elena understood that he'd finally become the man he was always meant to be. Not defined by his past, but shaped by it, using his strength to protect instead of harm, his power to build instead of destroy. The boys adored their baby sister, constantly wanting to help, to hold her, to show her their favorite things. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, and Elena couldn't imagine wanting anything else. On Sophia's first birthday, Elena's parents came to visit. Her mother pulled her aside while Dominic was chasing the boys around the backyard, Sophia giggling in her grandfather's arms. "I need to tell you something," her mother said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I need you to know that I understand now. About Dominic. About why you married him so suddenly all those years ago." Elena's heart stopped. "Mom? Your father's medical bills. They disappeared overnight right around when you told us about your wedding, the scholarships for your brother, the help we've received over the years." Her mother's eyes were bright with tears. "Dominic paid for all of it, didn't he? That was the deal. There was no point in lying." "Yes. You married him to save us." "I married him for a lot of reasons. But yes, initially, that was part of it." Her mother pulled her into a hug. "Thank you for sacrificing your freedom for our family. And thank you for finding love anyway, despite everything." "I didn't sacrifice my freedom, Mom. I found it." Elena looked over at Dominic, who'd collapsed on the grass with all 3 children piled on top of him, his laughter carrying across the yard. "He gave me everything I never knew I needed." That night, after the party ended and the children were in bed and Elena's parents had left, Elena and Dominic sat on their porch swing watching the ocean. "Your mother knows," Dominic said quietly. "She figured it out. Are you upset?" "No, I'm glad, actually. No more secrets, no more hiding." He pulled her closer. "Just us. Our family, our life." "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "Leaving that world behind, all that power?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, the clarity of knowing who your enemies were, what you were fighting for. But then I look at what I have now, you, the kids, this life we've built, and I realize I traded power for something infinitely better. What's that? Peace, purpose, love that doesn't come with conditions or contracts. He kissed her temple. You saved me, Elena, from myself, from a life that would have destroyed me eventually, and I will spend every day for the rest of my life being grateful for that. Elena thought about the scared girl who'd signed a contract 7 years ago, agreeing to marry a stranger to save her family. She thought about the man who'd been so much more than the monster she'd expected. She thought about all the choices they'd made, the bridges they'd burned, the future they'd built from ashes. We saved each other, she said finally. You gave me a family. I gave you a reason to become someone better. That's not one person saving another. That's two people choosing each other every single day. I like that version better, Dominic admitted. They sat in comfortable silence, the sound of waves providing a peaceful soundtrack. Inside the house, Marcus was reading to the boys before bed, a role he'd taken on as honorary uncle. Sophia was already asleep, dreaming whatever babies dreamed about. This was their life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and honest and built on a foundation of love that had survived everything thrown at it. Years later, when Alex and Luke were teenagers and Sophia was learning to navigate middle school, Elena would look back on those early days with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She'd tell her children the story, not all of it, but enough, about how their parents had met under impossible circumstances and found love anyway. She'd tell them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to believe in someone, even when everyone else says you shouldn't. That people can change if they want it badly enough. That family is something you build, not something you're born into. And she'd tell them that every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of fear and doubt had been worth it. Because it led to this. To them. To this family. To this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life. Dominic would add his own lessons. About the importance of redemption. About using your power to protect instead of harm. About the courage it takes to walk away from everything you've known to become someone better. But mostly, they'd tell their children this, that love, real love, isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for, worth changing for, worth building a life with despite all the reasons you probably shouldn't. And as Elena sat on that porch swing beside her husband, watching the sun set over the ocean, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice 7 years ago when she'd walked into that penthouse and signed her name. She'd thought she was signing away her freedom. Instead, she'd signed up for the greatest adventure of her life, and she wouldn't change a single moment of it.